Hello, my name is Keshwani. There's K-E-S-H-W-A-N-I, Keshwani. We are here because we want to prepare for the GMAT. We have been solving GMAT math problems out of this book here, GMAT Review, the official guide, the 13th edition. If you do not own this book already, purchase one immediately. You're going to need it. The problem that we are about to solve is the one that you will find on page number 281, and today is our lesson number 90. Page 281, problem number 71. Turn to page 281 and read the problem to yourself. Number 71, it goes something like this. N people, we are told N people gave $500 each. Then each of these N people persuaded N more people to give $500 each. The question simply is, how much is N? Now listen, before we bother to look at the two statements there, and before we bother to try to solve this thing as to what the value of N is, we have to first figure out what the equation is going to be in this scenario for total contribution. So let's start out with some numbers. Once we understand with the numbers, then we'll employ the symbols. For example, if three people gave $500 each, so in this case N equals 3. And then what happens? Then each of these three people persuaded three more people to give $500 each. So here N is equal to 3, and here we get 9. Where does 9 come from? 9 comes from 3 times 3. Because each of these three people persuaded three more people. It says N people gave $500 each. N in this case is 3. And then each of these 10 people persuaded, each of these three people persuaded three more people each to give $500. So the number of people that we have is N in the first round, and then N squared in the second round. This is N times N. N times N, or N squared. If we had, instead of 3 people, if we had 5 people, nothing would have changed. It still would have been same. Here we have 4 and we have 5. So N in this case equals 5, and each of these 5 people will persuade 5 more people. Each of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here we'll have 5 times 5, or N times N, or N squared. So in the first round, N people gave $500 each. In the second round, N squared people gave $500 each. If we had 10 people in the first round, so what he's saying is that 10 people gave $500 each in contribution, and then these 10 people turned around to their friends and family and so forth and persuaded 10 more people each. So now these 10 people are recruiting another 100 people to give $500 each. So the equation looks like this. The total contribution, let's call it T, looks like this. Total contribution is going to be 500 times N, which is the first round, and then 500 times N squared, which is the second round. N squared people will give $500 each. In the first round, N people will give $500 each. Now that we understand that part, we can begin to solve the problem. Which of course, we can take out the 500 common, and it turns out to be 500 times N plus N squared. This is our T. Let's put it here. Our total contribution is 500 times N plus N squared. Now we are ready to look at the two statements. So I'm going to erase all of this thing here on the top because I need the room. N people gave $500 each. N people gave $500 each. Then each of these N people persuaded N more people to give $500 each. Question is, what is N? So let's look at the first statement. The first statement tells us that the first n people donated 1/16 of total. The question is that enough? Is that enough to figure out what n is? And the only way we can answer that question, the only way we can understand whether or not the data that is given to us in the first statement is enough, is to understand this equation here. So here we are told that the first 16 people, the first n people gave 1/16 of the total. How much money did the first 16 people give? The first 16 people gave $500 each times n, and we are told that that equals 1/16 of the total. 1/16 of the total. Well, we know what total is in terms of n. Total in terms of n is T is 500 times n plus n squared, and then 1/16 of it. There you go. That's what we have to understand. And if we can see this immediately, the rest is free. The rest is downhill, I meant. The rest is downhill because now we have one equation with just one variable, 500 times n on one side of the equation, 500 times n plus n squared over 16 on the other side of the equation. Of course, this is enough. It's just a matter of solving it. But it is enough information to figure out what n is. A, B, B, C, E. Since the first statement by itself is enough, the answer cannot be B, C, or E. It will have to be A or D. Let's look at second statement. The second statement tells us that the total contribution was $120,000. Again, we know what the equation is for the total contribution. The equation for the total contribution is 500 times n plus n squared. As you can clearly see, this is equation with just one variable. There is no other variable here. 120,000 equals 500 times n plus n squared. Of course, it can be solved very easily. The second statement by itself is also enough. Therefore, the answer is D. That's it. We are done. The answer is D. What we're going to do from this point on is not something that we will do in the real exam. It will be a sheer waste of time in the real exam to actually figure out what n is, which is what we're going to do right now. We are curious to find out if the n that we're going to get from here is going to be anything similar to what the n is going to be from here. So let's do one at a time, okay? Let's first do the first statement, see what comes out, and then we'll do the second statement. As far as the exam is concerned, as far as the question is concerned, we are done. The answer is D. Let's do it here. So I'm going to erase this middle part. We don't need it here. The middle part is gone. This equals this. Let's divide both sides of the equation. Let's divide both sides of the equation by 500. If you divide both sides of the equation by 500, this 500 drops out. And we end up with 16n equals n plus n squared. 16n equals n plus n squared. You can take out the n common from here, n plus 1, and here we have 16n. Divide both sides by n one more time, and n drops out. And 16 equals n plus 1, which means n must be 15. That's what it was. It wasn't a big deal. We left it there. We said we won't actually have to solve it because in the exam it's not required and this and that. But it's only a two-step process. It should take no more than 5-10 seconds at the most. Let's see what the second equation gives us, shall we? Let's do second equation. Why should we do second equation? Why don't we do second equation? Why don't we do second equation right here? It says the total, the total amount that was contributed. It says the total amount that was contributed by the first round, by the people in the first round, was 1/16 of the total. And the total we know is n times, rather, 500 times n plus n squared. This is the total. 1/16 of that is going to be this amount. And this is the amount that was contributed by the people in the first round. Well, the people in the first round contributed 500 times n. That's our second equation. Let's keep it separate. Again, you can see the similarity. That's why I didn't want to erase it. That's why I didn't want to erase it for us to be able to compare it. No, sorry, that's not. That is the first statement. I'm confused. Let's do the second statement. Let's do the second statement here. The second statement says the total contribution was 120,000. So 120,000 equals 500 times n plus n squared. I was so proud about the similarities in the two scenarios. Of course there were similarities in the two scenarios because they were two blasted same things. I was just rewriting the same information. Let's divide both sides by 100. If you divide both sides by 100, the zeros are going to drop out. This 0 goes out with that 0. This 0 is going to go out with that 0. Now let's divide both sides by 5. If you divide both sides by 5, this 5 drops out. How many 5s in a 12? 12 has 2 5s. The remaining 2 goes and joins the 0, becomes 40. Oh sorry, becomes 20. 20 has 4 5s. And then this 0, of course, mustn't forget this 0, that took care of this 0, and now this 0 goes on. So we have n times n plus 1 equals 240. N times n plus 1 equals 240, that's what you should get out of it. How do we do it? Well, there are two ways to go about it now. One, you can solve it in a quadratic equation and it will make your life miserable, or you think you can be logical and rational. You must know your squares. I always emphasize, in many videos in the past I have emphasized that you must know your squares from 1 through 20 if you have any hope of doing well in the exam. You should know that 15 squared is 225. You should know it by heart. It comes in very handy in a situation like this. If 15 squared is 225, and since this is very close to 15, another thing we realize that it is n times n plus 1. Since it is n plus 1, these are two consecutive numbers. What we are looking at here is that the product of two consecutive numbers is 240. But we already know that 15 times 15 is 225. I'm curious to find out what 15 times 16 would be. Let's find out here. 16 times 15, how much would that be? Well, I know that 16 times 10 is 160, and 16 times 5 is half of that, which is 80. Well, what do you know? That is 240. That is 240. So this here is basically 15 times 15 plus 1. That implies that n equals 15. That's all. That's all it is. That's it, we are done. You see, we get the same answer, n equals 15. Now I did not finish it here because I did it this way here. I was too lazy to figure out actually this way because we had to figure out 15 times 16. Well, I know 16 times 10 is 160 and 16 times 5 is 80. So 10 15s and 5 15s, sorry, 10 16 and 5 16 should make it 15 16, which is 240. Or you can just do it out. 15 times 6, 15 times 5 is 75, 15 times 6 is 90, 0, 39. 15 ones are 15, 15 plus 9, 15 plus 10 is 25, therefore 15 plus 9 must be 24. Either way is fine, it's the same thing. That's it, we're done. Of course they both give us the same answer. They better give us the same answer, otherwise something is going wrong. I'll see you tomorrow, okay? Bye now.